The reason that a local public safety coordinating council really exists at its core is to approve the local Community Corrections Act plan. Now, it does so much more than that, and sometimes it's overlooked in terms of what it exists for, because it's really that congregation spot for a community to talk about the myriad of issues that face a community regarding the criminal justice system. Certainly our group has dealt with everything from sex trafficking awareness to homelessness, addiction services. We've really branched out to really try and make this a place where substantive conversations can happen. But for this purpose, it is driven by statute, and I need to present the Community Corrections Act plan. If it is approved by this body, it is then moved to be recommended by the Board of Commissioners. And at that point, we can go back to the state and say we have a locally developed plan. It is approved by our Board of Commissioners, and we enter into the continuing IGA with the state of Oregon. For parole and probation services, what we call community correction services in the state of Oregon, the funding goes through the Department of Corrections. It is allocated to each county based on a grant and aid process. Funding for community supervision services goes through the state, and they approve plans like this in every county. And this is the LIPSIC that that it is subject to approval with. Funding is allocated to each county based on a formula that takes into account the time and costs associated with supervising new, high-risk, medium-risk, and low-risk offenders in the community. A capitated rate is established, and counties receive funding based on the number of funded cases they have in relation to the state pool. Currently, Jackson County is set to receive 6.88% of the total state-funded caseload, and that is larger than our normal population, which is 5.2%, roughly. So we're 5.2% of the state population. We're 6.88% of the state-funded cases. The funding is to provide supervision, services, and sanctions for felonies and select misdemeanor cases. The select misdemeanor cases that are funded are drug cases that were previously felonies, and they receive funding. Currently in Jackson County, we receive quite a bit of that funding statewide. We have 14.5% of the state's population of funded misdemeanors, drug-related cases, and that population, that's 417 bodies that we're funded for on that. Those 417 people, 60% score out as high risk to reoffend. So we have a high risk population of drug offenders in our community. But I also want to mention that while we're here to talk about the community corrections funding and specifically what the state funds, it's important to note that our county does a lot within community justice to serve the criminal justice population. I'll talk today about that funded population, that 6.88%, that 2,450 bodies that right now, if you took a snapshot, are currently being supervised. But over the course of a year, our department touches many people's lives. You look at this graphic here, pretrial services will serve over 381 different people throughout the course of the year. DUII services, 2,869 different people over the course of the year. Community service will be utilized by 1,133 different people. Home detention, 294. The resource center, averaging 77 people per week. 4,004 people will be through that by the time the year's over. And then formal supervision, while we have 2,450 right now as a snapshot, we're going to serve over 3,291 when you count the total intakes that will happen over 2019. So it's important to note that that footprint is large, but it's not large in the sense that we're sending everybody to prison. It's not large in the sense that every one of these people will utilize jail. If I were to leave you with one thought today, I hope that it's that Jackson County has a robust and rich array of services meant to address the needs of our citizens at all different levels, and ideally at the lowest level of supervision that's required to safely have them serve the conditions of whatever it is that brought them into our system. So over the course of the next 2 years, we're set to receive $18.483 million from the state for community justice or for community corrections services. Currently, how that's allocated within Jackson County, $3.487 million goes to the jail, $4.68 goes to the transition center, and supervision and services will receive $10.3 million over the course of the year. It should be noted that that is kind of the backbone of our funding, but it's certainly not the only funding mechanism for the services that we apply to our population here locally. And I'll get into that in a little more detail. Jackson County invests heavily in our local supervised population. We're not a county that says, jail and prison is our intervention for people who are justice involved. We don't just look at folks and say, well, if they're in need, we're going to send them to jail. We put $1.4 million per year to transitional housing, and we'll talk more about that. It's actually 1.468 of general fund dollars. So it's very important to this county that when we talk about public safety, it's the full array of services. We invest $40,000 a year in misdemeanor domestic violence case supervision. This was previously supervised by a VIA grant, but that population is so important, so high risk, and presents such a concern in our community that we supervise those with local funds. And then we also have another $260,000 to make sure that we administer a full range of correctional programs. And in addition to those local investments, which come from Jackson County, we also do lean on our clients, our supervised population, to make sure that they're contributing and paying their own way whenever possible. We'll have over $1.3 million in client fees to provide this full array of services. So, we do talk about it, but whenever possible, we're shifting the financial burden of incarceration off of the taxpayer and onto the clients. And the clients we work with on the adult level are often very talented. They often have the ability to go out and make good money with once they're stabilized and can get employment. And so we make sure that we ask them to pay their way once they start living that way. It's part of the accountability commitment we have. So we mentioned the idea that jail is one of the areas that we invest in locally. Funding's provided to utilize local jail space for felony and select misdemeanor offenders on community supervision who are sentenced to less than a year, folks who are revoked for less than a year, or people who are sanctioned for violating their supervision. And currently we have 68 beds dedicated to local control in our jail. The challenge is that within our community, it's one of those things that we definitely have a larger need for, given our supervised population and the people that we deal with on a local control level. So we mentioned that it's not adequate, and it negatively impacts the compliance with alternate sanctions, participation in treatment, and it doesn't allow our clients to stabilize before we transition them to an alternate placement. We utilize justice reinvestment funds, another state funding source, to station release assistance officers at the jail with the aim of maximizing the efficiency of current jail capacity while ensuring local sanctioning ability and court appearances by defendants. The jail is often the first stop for folks when we initiate that particular sanction, but we have the ability to move them within a continuum in our community. So the Transition Center is the second placement that we noted in terms of our largest investments of our Community Corrections Act money. And it serves as an alternative to jail for clients who are serving a sentence or a sanction. It can serve as a transitional housing location, when I mentioned that county investment that we have in that. And some inmates from the State Department of Corrections or Federal Bureau of Prisons are serving the last portion of their sentence at the Transition Center as they transition back to the community, allowing them to reestablish connections with their family, get employment leads, identify any treatment needs, and start to have a foot in the water as they transition in a more structured manner. When we look at the Transition Center, there's really 5 general populations that are served out there. I mentioned that it's an alternative to jail for local offenders. So they may start their sanction at the jail. If we were to do a 30-day sanction, they would start in the jail. We would serve it. We'd meet the administrative criteria for serving that sanction, and then we'd have the ability to move them within the continuum. And oftentimes the Transition Center is that continuum. If they're employed or they have employment prospects, we can put them in a work release program so that person either maintains their employment or gains employment over the course of their sanction. People leaving with employment while serving a sanction greatly reduces their risk to recidivate, and it decreases the long-term socioeconomic impact of a jail sanction locally. I mentioned transitional housing, and we have our own Mike Hescock who's going to speak in depth about that tonight, but it really is rare and special to our community that we have this resource. It used to be that a person would be released from jail or homeless in a community, and there weren't a lot of options. You'd see somebody getting released from prison with a hefty bag that was duct taped and maybe a couple bucks in their pocket, and people would utilize hotel rooms. Well, in Jackson County, we have the ability to have this structured transitional housing environment so that people who are unhoused, people who are precariously housed, people who are just in need of a place to stabilize before a treatment bed opens, we have that at the Transition Center. The completion of the prison sentence, that is something new with short-term trans leave, but also the feds have been using that process for decades. And the last part of their sentence on the federal level is done in what they consider in community like that. We have a residential correctional treatment center out at the Transition Center. receives a lot of funding from Justice Reinvestment to run, but 15 beds dedicated to people who are in the justice system, who are on our caseload, who are looking for a longer-term treatment opportunity that will also include an employment component, housing, case management. And then supports for federal offenders. We're able to utilize space out there when necessary for local federal offenders who are on supervision in our community and needing to stabilize. They will use that as a sanction, but the purpose is to try and redirect and stabilize folks out there at the transition center. So in addition to medical, mental health, and support services, clients at the transition center may be eligible to receive work crew services. So they'll go out on work crew. And you might say, well, are they really receiving that? Is that something they're excited about? And I would argue they are. Folks are given job skills. They start to live on a schedule again. They remember what it's like to be productive in the community. They can look with pride at the work that they do. It offers us the opportunity to provide valuable infrastructure in our community while offsetting some of the costs of providing these correctional services, because the crews do receive revenue for the work that they do in our community. Folks could also receive work release. I mentioned that if they're employed or if they're eligible for employment. And we can work with job search skills and employment assistance. We have cognitive-based correctional treatment that's provided out of the transition center, and we can provide case management and transition planning. Case management can be something as broad as where are you going to live, what are your treatment options, how are you going to stabilize you with the health plan and with other food resources in the community, or it can be as specific as, have you ever created a budget? This is what a budget looks like. This will help you get there. So we can provide really structured programming to our clients around these valuable life skills that oftentimes they've lacked due to their criminal lifestyle. I mentioned earlier that we supervise cases based on risk. The risk principle for this purpose really refers to the likelihood or the probability that somebody will recidivate. We know that we can assess somebody and determine that risk, and when we do that in accord with the state rule that requires us to utilize certain tools, we will focus our resources on the people who are most likely to recidivate. We'll build case plans based on the items that they scored high on. So if they have a criminogenic need that's unmet, we'll make sure that we have services there to meet it, and we will work collaboratively with them to help them get there. But what we won't do is just use one-size-all approaches towards the clients we work with. I meant, if you look down here, it's kind of a gray scale, but there's a full range of interventions and sanctions that a person can utilize or that a PO can utilize while in supervision. A verbal intervention, and we often do skill building around that. Increased supervision, increasing the frequency in which somebody comes in, increasing the time that somebody spends with us. Enhanced treatment. I'll talk a little bit about our correctional grade treatment that we have in Jackson County that we've worked hard with our partners to help create. Community service, home detention, transition center. Some of our folks can be revoked to prison, and some of our folks can be sanctioned to jail or revoked to jail even. But I think it's really, again, if I could impress one thing, it's just that there is that full range, and we will utilize all of that. The other thing is that within a local control environment, we can often move people through that continuum upon serving their sanctions. So they could start at jail, move to the work center, be placed in a treatment facility, be placed at home if that's considered appropriate while they're serving their sentence. And those are things that we can do to make sure that we have the right intervention for the client based on where they're at and what they're presenting to us. We're looking to have 31 parole and probation officers. It will require some hiring because we did have an increase in our population over the last year. Within those 31 probation officers, we have some specialized caseloads. Domestic violence caseloads where we have cases that are marked by intimate partner violence and family violence, more often than not violence against women. We have sex offender caseloads where we have specified strategies for working with sex offenders in our community. We have geographic caseloads where we go out and try and intersect with the community and find ways that we can help stabilize people in their own homes. And we have a reduced supervision unit for those clients who pose the lowest risk to recidivate, knowing that we can maximize our value by focusing on the other higher risk folks when necessary. Within that, we have a Measure 57 caseload. We have specialty court caseloads, a mental health caseload for people who have been struggling or living with mental health issues in our community, reentry caseload for people coming back from prison, and we're able to collaborate with MADGE with the Medford Area Drug and Gang Enforcement Task Force to make sure that we are working collaboratively when enforcement strategies are best indicated for particular clients. Should also be noted that we use our CCA funds for administration and support to make sure all of this runs smoothly and we can create the type of infrastructure necessary to run this program. And we also use it to subsidize sex offender treatment, because while I mentioned we really like to have our folks pay their own way whenever possible, we don't want to have that. If somebody's barrier to treatment as a sex offender in our community is financial, we'll make sure they get that treatment that's necessary. So again, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the unique programs and services that exist in Jackson County. I don't want to belabor transitional housing, but I put it first because it's one of the things I'm proudest of when I look at some of our colleagues throughout the state, and they're envious of what we can do to help stabilize people. It is not every county that has this commitment to its population, and it speaks highly of the dedication we have to try and restore our folks when possible. Corrections grade treatment. I use the term corrections grade because it makes it sound cool, like a Ford truck. But the bottom line is that there are certain characteristics that the criminal justice population has that aren't always met in the community by a health-based alcohol and drug treatment program. So if we can help them enhance those beds, if we can build collaboration between, or those spots, and we can build collaboration between our partners, we have 120 spots dedicated to community justice clients right now for our formally supervised population. And it utilizes curriculum that is evidence-based to work with our population, and we have those kind of pieces built in so that we can get folks where they need when it's called upon. We have embedded mental health folks within our department. Again, when we talk about the things that are unique to Jackson County, we're not the only ones in the state that have that, but it's not, the list is short. So the idea that at the Transition Center, we have a QMHP, Stacy, qualified mental health provider, a master's level counselor who's certified as a specialist in forensic services, and she's also certified as an alcohol and drug counselor. So really, can I use the term unicorn? It's one of those people that you don't find very often that are able to do this work. She's dedicated to working at our population, with our population, and working as part of our team. Down at the Parole and Probation Office, Community Justice Office on West Main, you will see another embedded qualified mental health professional who's used to working with criminal justice populations, who's on site. So if a PO is recognizing something with one of their clients that says, this person needs a little more help, they can walk them over and say, hey, this is Sarah, she's here to help. If somebody's in our lobby and they're in distress or they're having a hard time regulating, we also have a QMHA, a skills trainer, and that skills trainer or that QMHP can go out and engage that client right there. So I really, again, the idea of real-time, qualified, and specialized care for folks in this setting is unique to what we do. The secondary piece is that our staff in community justice learn from those different expertises, learn from those different pieces, and it's been really a collaborative benefit to what we do throughout our department. We have the Resource Center. We had the Resource Center come and present, but the idea that people are planfully released from either the Transition Center or from jail with access to a number of different stabilizing forces, from DHS self-sufficiency, employment services through cutting-edge employment services. We also have our, like I said, our mental health folks are there, peer-delivered services from alcohol and drug specialists. We just have a full range of folks that are there to meet those people as they're released. I think the secondary piece is trying to extend the hours that's effective, so that if a PO has somebody that comes to visit them, that person doesn't have to make 6 spots through the community to help stabilize. They'll have one-stop shopping and have their needs met right there. We participate in specialty courts, so we have what we call rock court. If you call it drug court, people would understand, but the idea that instead of prison, people could utilize treatment resources on the front end here, stabilize, get well, and not utilize that prison bed, stay with their family. It's if you haven't had the opportunity, I would really recommend coming to one of the graduations and hearing some of the stories, because they all start kind of like this. Well, I wasn't really sure I wanted to do it. I was just kind of going through the motion, and then pretty soon I started to buy in and listen, and then before I knew it, I was actually going to group all the time and listening to this. It really is transformational. It seems to follow a pattern where people who are resistant to getting help reluctantly start, and once they start engaging, the results really are powerful, and it's some of the most powerful recovery we have in our community. It comes from our specialty courts. We also have a mental health specialty court. That's not funded through the state. We use a lot of local resources to make that happen, but those are folks who, but for their mental health diagnosis and their mental health concerns, would not probably be utilizing the criminal justice system to the extent they have. So to the extent we can minimize prison, minimize jail, and stabilize folks in their community, both of these models utilize a wraparound approach, a multidisciplinary team that kind of meets with those people and really tries to get them the services they need. Transitional Care Program, Mike again will speak to this, but that's that on-site residential treatment program out in Talent at the Transition Center. FSAP and Gender Responsive Services. FSAP stands for Family Sentencing Alternative Program. And it's the idea that if we have somebody who's the primary custodian of their child and they are looking at a prison sentence, if we can keep them in the community, stabilize them, often with the partnership of our local child welfare office, but stabilize that person, stabilize that parent, keep the family together. I mean, on the one hand, and this sounds a little crass, it's a tremendous cost savings for the entire system, but the impact that makes on that child's life, the safety it provides for our community, and the ability of many of these parents, and I'll be honest, a lot of them are women, a vast, vast majority that we work with in the FSAP program, the recovery we get there and the transformation it really is inspiring. And oftentimes it's because of that family component that they're able to kind of motivate before they can do it for themselves. So it's been one of those things where it's just been a win for our community. We're one of 5 pilot counties throughout the state that runs an FSAP program. They're going to be doing studies to see about really taking that out throughout the entire state so that all counties have access to that. And gender responsive services, the idea that women have very different needs within the criminal justice system that lead to their criminality, and subsequently there's different approaches that will lead to them exiting the criminal justice system. So finding assessment tools that work, finding case management tools that work, finding different approaches in terms of how we help women feel welcome, using universal precaution regarding trauma when we're dealing with women in our office. Eventually, we'd like to use that universal precaution for most of our clients, but right now it makes the most sense with our female population. But really, as a state leader within gender responsive services, I won't put you too much on the spot, Tira Hubbard, but Tira Hubbard's here, and it's been one of her passions that she's worked with extensively over a while. But getting to be a leader in that department really does mean a lot over the state. And then finally, employment, or not quite finally, but employment for justice-involved individuals. We carry a database that we've created with 192 partners in our community that are willing to hire people who are justice-involved. We've often called them felon-friendly employers. And we have a list of what crimes they do and don't hire, what skills they're looking for, what hours they offer, what the background check process is going to look like. So it's consistently updated. We also have contacts there. So if I have somebody like, let's say Tina, that's justice involved, and they come to our office saying, I need a job, I can say, okay, Tina, go to Acme, wherever that is. I can call that person and say, hey, Tina's coming. She's got a resume ready. I think she'd be a great one. And because of those relationships, we're able to help people get employment at a higher rate. So we're very happy about those types of things that we can offer. The 2 pieces that we're really excited about coming on board in the next biennium, Project Match and Peer Delivered Supports. So Project Match is the medication-assisted treatment and confined healing. Really, we're a partner agency in this. Oregon Health Authority is contracting with the ARC, so the ARC will provide treatment services. We've got a local medical provider that can look to see whether or not medication-assisted treatment is right for that client as they stabilize. It will be people on supervision because we have the most ability to control the length of stay that person has, and then we can also move them when it's appropriate. So our goal is not just to say, here's 90 days in jail as you stabilize in a medication-assisted treatment program. It's to say, here's 90 days sentenced to jail or sanctioned to jail, but our goal is to get you into a residential treatment program as you stabilize. Our goal is to get you into supported housing as you stabilize. And the jail's dedicated 4 beds for men and 4 beds for women to this effect. We'll have a PO dedicated to that process, and we'll make sure we work closely with treatment and other local providers so that we can transition people effectively. Other efforts throughout the state have often lacked that transition piece, that next step once they leave the jail. We're confident, we're optimistic about our ability to build those supports within our community and see people succeed. Peer-delivered supports, we're basing this on the research, although it's been in effect in some communities since 2004, people who are way ahead of the curve. But you'll start to see counties now that are really looking at people with lived experience as extremely effective at engaging people in the treatment process. I've said this, and I believe it, that the first step it used to be when somebody came into your office and that person was clearly suffering from addiction, and they'll use a term like tore up from the floor up, we'd say, oh, get that person to treatment, refer them to treatment right away. And sometimes that's appropriate, but sometimes when a person's really hurting and they're at those beginning stages of motivation, a peer could be the most effective tool at helping them, A, get to treatment eventually, but stabilize and really commit to a different way of life. So we're looking to have on-site peer-delivered services and case management. The other piece they'll do, besides just that one that I mentioned, is when a person is starting to rebuild their lives after being running around through the jail or running through these different processes that often come with criminality, there can be a lot of stops in the community. So if we've got somebody to help them navigate that and identify the different things they can do more effectively, or even just support them as they go to the Social Security office, go to get their driver's license, we're really optimistic, or the research is really strong in terms of what the outcomes are for those people at staying engaged and completing their plans. They'll also be engaged at the Transition Center in delivering skills and helping people develop transition plans, as well as having drop-in services available for people at the Parole and Probation Office at Community Justice. So I know that's a lot coming at you, but I really am excited about the full array of services we provide in this county, just the number of things we're able to do. A lot of it's because of collaboration. A lot of it's because of the investment that our county makes in this. Every county gets their CCA allotment. Not every county chooses to really devote resources to this. So we're excited about that piece going forward. Yeah, Jennifer.
I have two questions around resourcing, if you don't mind. At the start, you said it's a bit disproportional to our percentage of individuals, right?
Yeah.
Across the state. And I can't remember from the previous one if that has changed or if that proportion is, the percentage that we're getting in this county stays the same.
Good question, because I have the answer. So in our previous biennium, we were at 5.6%, 5.62 of the state population of supervised clients. Currently, we're at 6.88% of the supervised clients in the county, or in the state.
And what about the percent of funds that this county is pulling down through this?
That's the proportional amount
That's
of
the
funding.
proportion,
Yeah,
I hear you,
that's 6.
okay.
But Eric, do
Yes.
clarify.
Yes.
That doesn't mean our population actually grew
Right.
necessarily. It's a percentage of the statewide caseload. So if other counties went down, we could have stayed exactly the same, but our percentage of the caseload went up. So it's not necessarily that we have more people on supervision. Although in our case, we do have some more people on
Right.
supervision, but there's multiple factors that go into it.
Right, and that's really well put. It's looked at as a pizza, and what's your slice of the pizza? Pizza can either grow or shrink on a state level. Your slice can either grow or shrink as a proportion of that pizza.
So then I had a follow-up around resourcing. I heard in here new hires around parole and probation.
Yes.
Are there any other new expenses in the plan for this coming biennium?
Yeah, the project match and the peer delivered supports reflect that, and then there are also some increases in just the general cost of of doing business with staff cost increases throughout that. Right. Yes, Mayor.
Who are our major collaborators?
Right. We've been able to build those correctional grade treatment beds with the ARC, so the Addictions Recovery Center has been there for us. We've been able to work with the jail collaboratively to make sure we have the right people going in and out whenever we can, which honestly, if we didn't have that partnership, I couldn't imagine any of this being possible, because with constricted resources, it really makes a difference to have that level of everybody rowing together. We have employment services on site that are delivered through a local contractor. We have, DHS self-sufficiency. Jackson County Mental Health deserves a lot of credit for this, because they're the ones who've said this population is important to us, and this is the forum in which we believe we can really make a difference. So we're really happy to be able to build on those ones.
Eric, let me add just a little bit.
Sure.
So this particular proposal is specific to Community Corrections Act funding. And Eric's talking about programs that fall within that stream of funding. But Eric's department is a whole lot larger than that. So, and I just don't want to leave this, I don't want people to get kind of myopic about this is all you do, because if you take juvenile, then we're working with the nurturing center, we're working with DHS, we're working with
The schools,
on
absolutely.
track and foster parent placements, and so we have a huge array with the whole department of partners that we work with.
Thank you, that's helpful.
I'd make a motion.
So a motion to approve this for recommendation to the Board of Commissioners?
Second.
We have a second.
Eric, before
Yeah,
we take
sure.
a vote, I just want to say something. You know, I obviously am out in the community a lot. Some people know that this is how I started my career working in this field for 15 years. A lot of the things Eric talked about we delivered, I brought to the county, which I'm very proud of. And it's kind of disheartening to hear some of our public talk about all of the things that we don't do to try to help offenders. And we could pick one thing, the transition center. Eric, how many other counties have a transition center?
I think we're down to 4 in the state, 3 in the state. There's us, Marion, and
So the reason why we have that huge resource that has 165 beds and housing available for people that are unsheltered or homeless or whatever term you want to use is because the county invests in those things, and we see that as an investment to deter people away from prison and jail and more costly options. And Eric, I'm glad you took the time to actually go through. This isn't even everything that we do, but when I hear people complain about all the things we don't do, it seems to me that people are generally really uninformed when they make those complaints, and they almost seem to not believe that we're actually doing these things. And it's kind of our job as everybody around the table who sits on this Public Safety Coordinating Council to be the voice to those people that we're here to represent. And so, you know, I know everyone here knows this, but maybe everyone doesn't here know this. All of the mayors in the county select a mayor to represent the mayors. And it's the mayor's responsibility to report back to the mayors what they've learned about PSCC. And the same thing with many representatives that are here and the reason why we're here. And so I'm just encouraging everyone. This is a small piece of what community justice does, but we're having a big community discussion about the need for a jail or not the need for a jail and what services we have and don't have. I'm encouraging everyone to get out there and share what you've learned today about all of the things that we do in the county.
Thank you, Dan. I think that's really well put. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Another biennium of CCA plans. We'll recommend that to the board for final approval. We did have a number of folks from Community Justice speak to the Sheriff's Advisory Group about a week ago. We went a little more in depth into the programs, and honestly, the people who directly deliver them, they add a little more spice to it, and there may be a chance to bring that back and actually share that a few more times because it really does go into some of the details. It is pretty heartening, and one of the people who was there, and I'll put him on the spot a little bit, but Peter Buckley said, this is exactly what I needed to hear our county was doing to get me to the point where I can support some of these other efforts. So there's some good folks doing good things out there, and we'll work on getting that shared. So part two of our Public Safety Coordinating Council focus on homelessness in Jackson County and the nexus it has with law enforcement or the criminal justice system. Part one was really about those front-end responses and some of the things that are happening, some of the things that are taking place on the Greenway, both environmentally and in terms of interpersonal interactions. We talked a little bit about mental health frontline interactions. We were able to really kind of give an overview of those front end. This is how we first engage and come into contact with folks. And we wanted to come back and talk about some of the things we do around transitioning folks, around providing support for people, and what that looks like in terms of resources in Jackson County. I know folks didn't show up today with the idea that they wanted to watch videos, but we actually got some people who were consumers of these services with lived experience to come in and talk about some of that experience. I was thinking it'd be about a minute per video. We'd get a little bit of context. It would add a human element and really make real what we're talking about. As it turns out, each of these videos is about 4 minutes, but I will rest assured that it is some of the most powerful reflection on what it is to be in this community and what's working for these people in this community that you'll see. So we're very happy to share that. And again, I just want to encourage you to stay with that. I've also asked our presenters today to really speak to the foundation of what they do, to try and make it accessible to everybody so that I may not know access inside and out, but I've really asked them to kind of set that up for me so I get a sense of what that is. So it may be broader than just the criminal justice system today, but that's to provide that context and that oversight.
What it was like, that is probably the worst feeling, just not knowing where you're going to go. Having to walk around basically until you find a place to go sit down for a while, like even calling up friends and just going over just to sit down and get warm for a little while, or having to go do illegal things to come up with money to get a hotel room or things that you wouldn't normally do. And I owned my own home before my addiction, so going from owning my own home to not having a home, that was hard. That was pretty devastating and something that I think kept me out there for a lot longer than what I would have liked to have been. yeah, it's a pretty desperate feeling when you're just sitting there not knowing where to go. And then with being in addiction, I was a heroin addict, so I had to keep myself well, and then there's that. And when you don't have a solid place to stay, like I remember always thinking, if I just had somewhere where I could just lay for 2 weeks and just be sick and get over it, then I could do this. But it was always I'd have to wake up, hustle up money to have a place to stay, or hustle up drugs so that I could go stay at somebody's house, because that was basically your ticket through the door. I spent a year in county jail, and then I got the opportunity to get into Rock Court, and Rock Court is 100% changing my life. I can't say enough good things about it. When I was in jail and was talking about getting into Rock Court, a lot of people were like, don't do it. You're just putting out the inevitable. And, unless you really want to quit, you don't do the program. And it was like, I want that help. Like, I could have gone to prison and I wouldn't have been in prison as long as I'll be in the program. So I would have been done with everything sooner. But I felt like if I went to prison, I would have came out in the same situation that I was in. And I knew that because I had been in jail for a year and got out for 6 days and had to turn myself back in. But during those 6 days, I found myself out on the street again. And it just in 6 days. I mean, my probation officer, Steve, is amazing. They're so supportive. When they say that they're really here for you, if you just open up and be honest about everything, like they really are. It's a great program. I mean, there's no way that you can turn that there's not somebody there to help you with the situation. No matter what, they're not going to let you fall. Like, you really have to want to fail to not pass the program. And so that has saved my life. If I wouldn't have gone to inpatient treatment, I don't think that I would have been able to do it either, because people used to always ask me, why do you stay, or why can't you just stay clean? And well, I didn't want to, because I was using to numb, and I didn't know how to get through those feelings of what was making me want to use and everything. And so going through inpatient, it gave me that safety net of like, I didn't have to try and find a place to stay that night. I didn't have to try and find my next meal. I just got to be safe and have people there that cared about me, and I got to talk about what I was going through and the issues that were making me want to numb and not, want to feel and everything. And so that's when I really learned what recovery is. And it's not just staying clean. Recovery is a whole new lifestyle, and it's amazing. Since I've gotten out of inpatient, I lived at Rogue Retreat in one of the houses, the group living, and now I'm in the STAR program. And then from there, I'll probably try and get into an Oxford or into my own place. I have stable work now, and I'm going to be working with Nathan Beard to be, try to get back into dental assisting and stuff. And so just, taking baby steps.
So our first speaker today, he was actually ready last month to present, and we decided that it could have gone on front end or back end services, but Lieutenant Josh Aldrich from our jail is going to speak about jail services and homeless population.
Thanks. So I'm Josh Aldrich. I'm the jail commander. Really, this started in the jail in the last couple of years, where we recognized that there are portions of the population who are criminally justice involved, and when we get them in the jail, we can help provide the resources that they need, right? And so with the direction of the sheriff, we put together a couple teams, one focusing on those folks who are with us with addiction issues, one with folks who have mental health concerns, and then this last one for the homelessness piece. And so it's kind of a difficult thing, and we'll talk about that as we go on, but really our hope was that we have this time with these people who are affected and maybe need some resources, and how can we coordinate the community to come in to the jail and help people out while they're with us. When we run reports of people who have listed themselves as homeless or transient, right, that's the word that they use for housing of the jail, it shows that there are 1 in 3 people who are currently in our jail who list that they don't have appropriate housing. I think that those numbers are a little off. We'll talk about that in a minute. But go ahead. And so what we really want to do, like I say, is to find ways for resource providers in the community to have opportunities to connect with these people. And so we do that in a couple ways. One, and the most obvious way, is with that population of inmates in our facility, people who we can identify that maybe have need. We find out specifically what the root causes of their problems are, and we have resource providers come in. And then we also really have this opportunity in the lobby of our facility. So a lot of people come and go through our little community there at the jail. And so to be able to provide pamphlets, occasionally we have people in inclement weather situations that'll just kind of come try to hang out in the jail lobby, right? They want to come out. It's open sort of 24 hours a day. And so we have deputies and sergeants that'll go out and actually talk to these people and find out, like, how can we help? Where'd you come from? It's getting a little bit of the backstory. And then really, ideally with that population that's in the facility, it would be great if we could find a way that at the time of their release, we could coordinate with those providers and have a place for them to go. And one of the things that's really been an issue is we don't know when that release is always going to be, right? And so we'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. But to help with this process, a year or so ago, we've heard a few times about the Resource Center. So this really helps us with those people who are released kind of first thing in the morning. We can send people from the jail to a place where all these providers are at one location, right? And it has helped a great deal with a certain portion of our population. Unfortunately, because we're so overcrowded, we're releasing people 24 hours a day, or trying to do that less at night now. But outside of those Resource Center hours, so to what Eric talked about, extending those hours, finding ways that we can help people get there would be a great deal of help. And then lastly, another thing that we do at the jail, and this kind of started as just something that some of the deputies who had concern began doing years ago, and that was during the inclement weather months, you'd have deputies that go out and buy like warm socks, and they'd bring coats from home. And so, helping these people who don't have a place to go when they get out of the facility with just some appropriate clothing for them. So that's another one of the things that we do here at the jail. One of the ways that we've had the greatest deal of success is to create these kind of personal relationships and learn the story of how people got into our community. And so just as an example, we had a gentleman who was arrested, kind of a low level of criminality, but was committing crimes in the community, got him to jail. And when we had conversations with him, we found out that he was from somewhere in the Midwest, and he had kind of followed a relationship to the West Coast. Things fell apart. One thing leads to another. He's been here for some amount of time, has no money or resources, is living on the streets, and has found himself in our custody, right? And so through conversations, we learned that he had family. I think it was in like Kansas. He had family in Kansas that really wanted to see him, and they were willing to help out, and they had a place for him to stay. And so we were able to communicate with the DA's office and the courts to kind of have those charges set aside for the time being, and then find some funding to get him on a Greyhound bus and back to his family, right? And so those have been sort of our biggest success stories over the years, is developing those personal relationships to find out what leads to people being with us. Some of the problems that we have, though, again, back to this statistic of 1 in 3, a lot of people when they're lodged in jail and we do this intake interview, they're not always completely open with us at that moment in their life, right? And so people who just don't want us to know where they live will oftentimes say, like, I'm transient. And so trying to decipher who really has a place to live, who's really in need living in the streets, that's been really difficult. And so the way that we've kind of began to do that is this group, and actually Sergeant Russ Bean back there is in charge of the homelessness group in the jail, is that we have deputies and sergeants and record staff who are asking specific questions to people and trying to develop kind of a personal relationship. You say you're transient, well, where exactly are you living, right? And try to weed through those numbers from the 1 in 3 and get it down to really who's in need right now in our facility, and to work with those folks specifically. And we oftentimes, again, with this population, when a guy in a uniform comes up to them and says, I'm from the sheriff's office, I want to help you find a place to live, it's not always received well, right? And so that's kind of something that we've had to work through. And really, the success stories we've had, they result in that information being shared in our inmate population and people being a little more receptive to it as we go forward. And then probably our biggest obstacle, like I mentioned initially, was we never really know when people are getting out of custody in our facility. So oftentimes, especially with those people who are charged with kind of a lower level crime, that charge can be dropped by the courts. They can come up on our release matrix kind of at any time of the day, right? And so not knowing that transitional piece, not being able to hold on to people long enough so that they can get to the resource center, it's caused really sort of difficult problems for us. It never fails. It's 8 o'clock at night on a Friday night when none of the resource providers are open anymore that we find out we have to release somebody from custody. And so that's something that hopefully, if we ever have the opportunity to expand jail space, we can release people at appropriate times to get them back into the community resources that we need. And then, one of the biggest issues that we have at the facility is, and it was talked about a lot last week, but so many of these folks who are affected by homelessness have all these co-occurring disorders going on too, right? So can we really treat their homelessness concerns before we get to the root of the addiction and the mental health issues that are happening? And so some of the things like the match program that are starting up in the facility and then partnerships with Jackson County Mental Health has helped us to start to touch on that. But again, it takes time to get to some of those people, and we don't always have that. I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Real quick before we see the video, I just want to give one, you're going to hear somebody talk about spending a year in jail. It wasn't our jail. They had to spend it in a different jail. So, yes.
I wanted to ask Josh
Yeah,
a question. Are
okay.
you done speaking, or are you going to take questions?
No, the questions are good. I didn't know if we want to do them all at the end, but yeah. Any questions now? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, it's more to make a point.
Yeah.
This is just because of my personal working experience. Oftentimes, you said 1 in 3 people are reporting that they're homeless or transient
Right.
when they come to jail. And I just want people here to know that that's a self-report. And oftentimes when people come to jail, they come because they got arrested for drugs or stealing stuff. And they don't like to tell the police where they live. So it's easier to not have people go serve a warrant at their house if they say, I don't live anywhere. The question, the reason why I asked the sheriff in this question and looking for the data is because a lot of people's concerns about building more jail beds it's our goal just to lock homeless people in. And so 1 in 3 seems like a lot of people that are homeless. I actually have our auditor looking at, so what happens is people say they're homeless when they come to jail, but when they get interviewed for pretrial release, one of the things you can do if you have a house is get released early. So it's amazing how many people get arrested and report that they're homeless, and then when it comes time to be interviewed for pretrial release, they all of a sudden have a house. So we're gathering that data for people, and I think that it will be more telling than just what we're gathering in self-report from initial bookends.
Yeah, absolutely. The 1 in 3 is definitely not an accurate statistic for how many people in the jail are homeless right now. It's just one of our biggest difficulties is getting to the root of who really needs the help. So, all right, since Danny put me on the spot, anybody have questions for me while I'm up here? And another thing I just want to say, lastly, we're open to all of those resource providers in the community that want to come in and help, and that's something, those relationships have grown a lot over the last couple of years. So, if anybody knows, if you listen to people talk about the jail and you go, there's this group that really would like to help, please give us a call, give the sheriff a call. We want to get as many of those people in as we can because really that's the only way we're going to help this population right now. So, all right, thanks.
The homelessness happened pretty fast for me. I didn't even realize that I was homeless for the longest time just because, if I had somewhere to be that night and to continue to get high, it was like I didn't consider being homeless. It took quite a few years before I realized that I was just another person that was homeless, and it was miserable. You know what I mean? Not knowing where you're going to go that night and who can you take advantage to be able to sleep somewhere, you know what I mean? And it was just sad, really. It was very sad. And I didn't really know what to do about it, and I didn't really care for the longest time, so I just continued down that path. The change shifted in my life when I had hit my rock bottom. I was done with everything, you know what I mean? I didn't like the people that I was around. I didn't like being in jail consistently. I didn't like just everything that was my life, and I knew that I had to change it. And I eventually started checking in with my PO, and I told him that I wanted to change. I checked myself into outpatient treatment, and I told them I needed inpatient before I disappeared, and I got checked into inpatient treatment within a week and a half and stayed there until they pretty much kicked me out, stayed there as long as I could, and just basically went after everything that everybody told me was the right thing to do. You know what I mean? I just took suggestions from anybody and everybody that was on the path of success, and winners stick with winners, you know what I mean? And if you want to be a winner in your clean time, you have to stick with winners and take suggestions, you know what I mean? And that was what I was willing to do. I was willing to take suggestions from anybody and everybody that knew a better way to live than I did. The challenges and barriers that that I thought were there was I didn't think there was help for someone like me. You know what I mean? Somebody that was so deep in the criminal justice system that nobody wanted to help me. You know what I mean? And I didn't know that there was an extremely large amount of ways to get housing as long as I was doing the right thing. You know what I mean? And that's all it took, was me doing the right thing and asking people, like, you know what I mean, what are some of the things I can do to fix my housing situations? And I mean, it got to the point where there were so many different things to fill out and to put my name on to get housing that it almost got annoying. There were so many of them, and you know what I mean. And still, I was not very hopeful to be able to get any of these things because of how bad my criminal background is. And I very quickly realized that a lot of these people didn't care about any of that. You know what I mean? That didn't matter because I was making the right steps to better my future, and that's all that mattered. And I eventually got my own apartment, living happily, college student, you know what I mean? And I couldn't be happier.
Good afternoon. I'm Michael Heskark with the Transition Center out in Talent with Jackson County Community Justice, the program manager out there. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Transitional Housing Program as well as our Transitional Care Program, the recovery-based program that we offer. First off, the Transitional Housing Program, I believe, was established around 2006. Currently holds 52 beds between male and female offenders, female clients that we utilize. To date, we have what is tallied as just over 12,500 calendar days of serviced housing within the Transitional Housing Program. Now, that is based off of just over 261 intakes. Some of those intakes have come through multiple times over that calendar year. That's from January of this year to today. That gives us that much opportunity to keep that many people off the greenway, off the streets, and out from underneath the bridges, and give them a different housing environment to be able to be successful in. We offer a clean and sober living environment for that. It's a program that, as Eric had mentioned, when you get folks that come in literally with their life in a bag, whether they're coming from Department of Corrections or from the Parole and Probation Office, they don't have a lot of resources. And so they come there just as a housing opportunity, and we've been able to take that and expand that into some resource delivery and some service connection within that program. So it is overseen by a certified case manager. That is a DPSST certified case manager. They go through the Parole and Probation Academy, and that person facilitates the program delivery and the service delivery within that program of transitional housing. It works and is based and focuses on employment services first, establishes relationships with service providers such as the Goodwill Employment Service and Disability Service. Some of the folks that come through our transitional housing program don't have the ability to work, and so we help connect them with that disability service as well. Those that are identified to be able to be working, we get connected with employment services. Goodwill is one of those partners that we work with. On top of that, we also utilize Nathan Beard and the contract that he has with Cutting Edge Employment LLC. He is a great resource for building those employment connections that are willing to work with the population that we serve. And on top of that, the Jackson County Community Justice Resource Center, we utilize them through the one-stop shop delivery service that they provide as well with our clients. And they assist with the facilitation with the case manager, and also through some of those providers, assist with resume development, budgeting classes, being able to do mock interviews, and then again getting them in a situation where they can get their foot in the door with somebody that's willing to take a chance on them through those employment connections. The employers that we are able to connect our clients with benefit from these people coming from such a structured living environment and a regimented environment, and getting the opportunity to have them prepared to enter the workforce. They get the benefit of being able to know that these are people that are coming from a clean and sober living environment. So there's verification of their sobriety and their recovery coming into that employer's office and coming through that front door because of the services that they get through our program out there. When it comes to treatment, so within the Transitional Housing Program, we Within the treatment referral process we have there, that case manager identifies folks that have issues with addiction, with mental health. As Eric had spoke to on some of the topics with this, we have that qualified mental health provider. We have certified drug and alcohol counselors on site to be able to assist with getting them in touch with recovery-based opportunities. So getting them set up with drug and alcohol assessments, whether it's getting them a connection to look at whether they can be evaluated for medically assisted treatment, identifying folks with mental health needs to be able to connect them with the right service provider to be able to help them while they're in that transitional housing opportunity to get into a situation of long-term livability and addressing some of those needs that help keep them off of that homelessness lifestyle. One of the things that we work with, as well as the Addictions Recovery Center, is Jackson County Mental Health, again, is a huge resource for us. Options is another one, Phoenix Counseling, a lot of collaborative efforts that we have within our own community to help connect those. We take an opportunity with the Transitional Housing Program as a bridge gap for folks that are looking to get into residential drug and alcohol programs as well. It's an opportunity for them to have a stable environment to be in while they're waiting for that next available bed, that residential bed, to be able to benefit long-term from there. Housing resources, we work with them to go through the application process, navigating that for everything from DHS, Road Retreat, as you had heard the lady mention in the video there, Oxford houses. We have a connection with those service providers as well. Some come into the facility and meet with our folks, and then the case manager also helps facilitate that application process, getting them connected with long-term stable housing. Transportation, we're conveniently located right on the bus route there, so as far as employability and service connection, getting them to and from those appointments with, whether it's a parole and probation office, treatment, mental health, employment, it helps benefit with that. We also offer the shuttle service availability to get down to the resource center for the folks that are just coming in on the front end from our transitional housing program to be able to get down and connect with some of those services as well. And even the case manager can sometimes meet some of those transportation needs as emergency arises too. So they help facilitate that kind of a wraparound service or that ability to bridge that gap from temporary homelessness to long-term stable housing. And we've had folks that stay as a matter of days up to months to several months at a time. And we work with that, again, as an employment focus, and then bettering the other parts of their lives that are lacking, the recovery, the mental health, trying to address all of those with the services that we can provide through that.
Are there any parameters, excuse me for interrupting, but are there any, I don't know what to call them, but external constraints on how long a person can stay at the transition center? It sounds like it depends on the various processes they're going through.
It's a needs-based
ultimate limit.
Mm-hmm. It's a needs-based system. So not a real solid answer for you, but it's a needs-based system. You take each individual and you look at what they have. Again, this case manager, having gone through the same academy as the parole and probation officers downtown, knows the case planning system, knows the connection that they're going to have and what that long-term plan for that individual is. So some people can be a little bit longer. Sometimes it's not easy to get into a residential treatment bed, and so that can be a longer-term stay. Some it's a shorter stay.
Is it unusual that somebody spends 6 months there?
We have had folks stay close to a year. Ultimately, we want to be transitional in nature. We would like to be able to have a longer-term plan in place long before that. But sometimes individual circumstances drive that for each person. So there's not really a framework of you get this many days. We look at what the overall benefit for that client is, what the overall benefit for the end goal and the case plan is.
But just to clarify, it also depends on how the person ended up there. If the person was sanctioned there, like it's punitive that they're going there, while at the same time hopefully helping them accomplish this goal, they can be there a minimum amount of time. So they could be sanctioned there 30 days and then to be there 30 days. Some people are there voluntarily because they have no other resources. You can't make someone stay there even if they're there voluntarily. So that also dictates how long they may be there. They may not want to follow the fact that they have to be clean and sober and follow these rules, so they'll leave. And if they're not there for purposes of a sanction, then they're not necessarily required to be there, although they are required to report their address to their supervising officer if they leave.
Which is a good point, why we work with our justice-involved population. Everybody that comes through there is part of the Jackson County Community Justice population. So the ideal goal is to get them into that motivational state of change and to work with them. Some people, as Danny mentioned, may not be quite ready for that, which is why we have that 260 plus total intakes to year to date. And some of those 260 plus have been there several times in the last 10 months. They will come and go to be able to utilize that service. But it's a service that we are fortunate to have. Having done this job, I know that there's a lot of opportunity that was not there in the past. And some of the populations that we work with as a community justice entity don't always have all the open doors out in the community that other people do. Now the TCP program. So the Transitional Care Program is the second piece to this. They are some of the population that also pair into our transitional housing statistics. And that's because it's a recovery-based program, it's a cognitive-based program, so it's a different delivery system than some of the other quote-unquote typical treatment providers would have. It breaks down your thinking process and how that drives your behavior more so than just the addiction and recovery piece. This program was established, I believe, in about 2016. It also has a certified case manager attached with it. It's a pretty intensive program because of the delivery system of the curriculum. It's a very intense residential program that they do that with. Again, the qualified mental health professional, the certified drug and alcohol counselors that we have on site are immersed in this program as well. They work very closely with the population over the course of its span in delivering some of the classes. So you have your cognitive-based program, your substance abuse program. We also offer employment programming, and each one reinforces the other out of this curriculum for this group. It services up to 15 people per group, which is a relatively small population, but it is a pretty big bang for its buck on the back end with the stats here. We are currently into our 9th group, so it's a somewhat new program in the grand scheme of things. But over the last 8 groups, we have had a total of 122 intakes, and of that 122 intakes, we have completed and graduated 68 of those individuals, men and women. And of that for the math people in the room, I had to write it down, but that's about a 55.7% completion rate. So the national average, I believe, for residential drug and alcohol is around 30. So we are actually getting a pretty good yield on the successful completion within that program. Our curriculum, again, focuses around addiction and thought process and how that drives that action and that behavior. Employment, housing. It addresses the high-risk situations that these people find themselves in within each component of that. So it works within the employment realm of what are some of the risky situations that these folks can sometimes find themselves in, and kind of work with them and role play with them and come up with different actions and different thoughts that will end up in a different result throughout that process. 3-phase program.
Sorry, Mike, as we get close, I just want to make it, we've probably got one more minute. I've got to
Gotcha.
make sure everybody gets a spot. Sorry about that.
Yes, no. 3-phase program, it's about 20 weeks long, give or take. At the end of it, they develop a success plan for reintegrating into the community and becoming a positive piece to that. Danny had mentioned something last time, and I wanted to wrap back around to that. I've started my career with a lot of people in this room, and over the course of that time, it's actually very refreshing now to be seeing the amount of resources that are available out there. There were not that many resources back in those days within our department or within the community. So it's pretty beneficial to see the impact that we can have with this population. And then it's up. Questions?
Thank you, Mike. I really do.
Excellent.
My mom got kicked out of a trailer house with my felony background. I wasn't allowed to be there. I kept coming over there because I didn't, I really had no other place to be. And they evicted her. We had to actually sell the trailer, and she moved into a rental. At that point I had a car, and I was able to kind of camp out in my car, but I didn't have the license. And then one night I got pulled over, and they took the car with all my belongings in it. Not only did I lose my place to stay, I lost all my belongings too. Ended up at a friend's place out in White City. It was a cold, wet winter, staying in a tent in a muddy backfield, That went on for a while. And then I collected a couple more felonies. I was driving around a stolen van, for a warm place to sleep, and I got arrested for UUMV, unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. And I had some meth on me, and when it come time to go to court, I went in and talked to the public defender, and she mentioned something about drug court, rock court, and I thought, well, I've had a few friends doing that, and I was just looking at it as a way to maybe prolong my going to prison. I was looking at 36 months. I'd known some people that had done rock court, and they weren't able to complete it. They ended up going to prison. So I figured, that's probably what was going to come with me, because I really didn't think I could ever get clean, let alone participate in a court program and actually do it. I went to prison in jail, county jail here. I started probation in Jackson County when I was 18 years old. But this time when I seen how serious the judge was, and she told me I had to do a couple things, and one of them was to, I didn't have a safe place to stay, so she told me I needed to go to the mission and stay at the Medford Gospel Mission. And another one was to go to two 12-step meetings a week of my choice, Pled in, and I had to stay at the mission, and it saved my life, because at the mission, you have to go to chapel. You're required to go to chapel every night. I was able to get that connection with the higher power real fast, almost immediately. I started going to meetings, Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous. I go to both. I changed everything. I gave up, everything, all my old friends, acquaintances, whatever, and all the people, places, and things. I didn't ever think I'd be able to do it, really, and things just started getting better immediately for me, My health was bad, I have COPD, and my next stop was death. My next stop was a coffin, probably, because I was on oxygen 24/7. My liver was going. I had Hep C. They cured that for me. I got all my teeth pulled, or what I had left of my teeth. I got new teeth. I got hearing aids. My liver's coming back. My health is better. I was riding my bike everywhere I went for the first year. Thanks to Rock Court, I was able to get my driver's license back. I'll have 18 months of sobriety next month. It's rough, even when you're doing good. It's hard with the felony record, getting jobs. I didn't have any ID. I didn't have a birth certificate. I didn't have a Social Security card. So it's almost impossible, to do anything without some help. It's rough. It's rough when you're out there. I wouldn't give up my life today for anything. And if I keep doing what I'm doing now, I think I'll probably keep getting what I've been getting, and that's just better every day. My mom is 94 years old, and at this point, she's I've been spending every night with her. She's up at the hospital, and she's going into hospice. She's at the end of her life, and I'm able to be there for her, That's one of the best things, because that's all she wanted, was to see me clean and sober, and she don't have to worry about me anymore, and I get to be there for her, be present in the moment, but she knows she can go now, because, she don't have to worry about me anymore, because, I'm making my amends by living amends just by staying clean for her.
Good afternoon. I'm Jason Elsey. I'm the Executive Director of the Housing Authority of Jackson County. I just want to thank you for inviting me today. We like to have the opportunity to share a little bit about what the Housing Authority does, the role it plays in the community, and I was asked today to talk a little bit about who we are, what we do, and talk a little bit about the housing market as we see it from our lens. So the Housing Authority was actually established in 1969. We're a quasi-public entity. We are not We're not HUD. That's often a misconception. And we're not the county. However, we are governed by a 7-member board that is appointed by the Jackson County Board of Commissioners. Next slide. What we can do in a very high-level overview of what we do can be broken down into 2 very big buckets. One is we administer the Housing Choice Voucher Program. You might have heard that referred to as Section 8, or sometimes as HUD. That is a federally subsidized program that we administer here at the county level. We have roughly 2,100 vouchers out in the community, and what that means is a tenant receives a voucher, and they go out into the community and they rent a home. That voucher allows them to pay 30% of their income for rent, and the voucher makes up the difference between the market rent and the 30% that they pay with a direct payment to the landlord. So as I said, we have about 2,100 out in the community. That number has grown very little over the 20 years that I've actually been at the Housing Authority. I've been there 20 years. We've seen that number increase by about 350 vouchers. 300 of those are VASH vouchers set aside for homeless veterans. And then recently we were awarded 35 mainstream vouchers for homeless or institutionalized non-elderly disabled people. The other big bucket that we do is we actually own and manage over 1,500 affordable housing units throughout Jackson County. Those are spread out everywhere from Ashland to Shady Cove to Rogue River. And we actually have 3 sites as well in Grants Pass. We don't just do housing. We have 2 small programs. One is called the Family Self-Sufficiency Program. That's set aside for recipients of that Housing Choice Voucher. We have 2 case managers that help people receiving rental subsidy eventually work towards self-sufficiency. So they're receiving government assistance now, where we have many programs in place to help them work towards getting off that assistance and eventually becoming self-sustaining. We also have a resident service program. We have 2 caseworkers that help the clients that live within our housing. And that can be anything from helping people keep their housing. A lot of the programs that we do are actually information and referral. We're not exactly next slide please. We're not a social service provider, but we do a lot of information and referral. We work with a lot of community partners in Jackson County to bring services to our clients. One of our biggest programs are set aside for youth, after-school programs, summer programs, and homework assistance programs and things like that. Next slide. We're also a multifamily residential housing developer. We're actually the biggest affordable housing developer in Southern Oregon. Generally, we develop between 50 to 100 units every year to serve the clients that we do. Those 1,500 units that I talked about that we own and manage, generally all of those units were developed by the Housing Authority. We have a team of 3 full-time dedicated staff. That's what they do. Generally, we have a pipeline of potential development. We try to have a land supply of at least 5 years worth of development, and at any given time we may have a housing project of 50 to 100 units, somewhere between concept to construction to completion. Some of the funds that we use for housing development are both state and federal funds. Generally, those funds aren't 100% development. Generally, our projects have private financing, and these type of funds, state and federal, are all filtered through the Oregon Finance Authority called Oregon Housing and Community Services. They take state funds and federal funds, consolidate it, and make those awards. We compete for those funds along with nonprofit and for-profit developers. Generally, those funds are oversubscribed 4 to 1, very competitive and very complicated to use. So it's not just a free-for-all of funds coming in, it's an allocation generally once or twice a year that we're competing for with the rest of the state. This is just an example of one of the developments that was recently completed. This is a 50-unit apartment complex. You've probably seen it downtown at 6th and Grape. This one's unique because we partnered with Pathways to provide 18 units for people living with disabilities. They have offices on site, and they provide the service piece and the referrals to the clients that live there, and we provide the housing. Here's another one, Patriot Station. This one was also completed. a couple years ago. This is in White City. This one is unique. There's 64 units of affordable housing, and a number of those units are set aside for homeless veterans. We work in tandem with the VA. They provide the referrals, they provide the services, and we in turn provide the housing. Who we serve, generally we're serving people that are earning 80% of area median income or less. Most of the state and federal resources that I talked about are actually geared towards 50% area median income or less. What that means, presently our median income in Jackson County is $64,800. We're serving people that earn half of that. Our target populations are families, individuals, elderly, disabled, you name it. Those populations are somewhere on our wait list. Generally, the people that we see in our housing units, about 50% are elderly disabled. I was asked to talk a little bit about the housing market. Everybody has heard that we're in a housing crisis, and that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. From our lens, what we're seeing is there's a huge supply and demand issue. We're seeing that in this slide, it just essentially is showing that the population in Jackson County is increasing. What that boils down to is that 9,361 figure. That's roughly, on average, the household size in Jackson County is 2.4 members per household. That breaks down to about 3,900 households. In contrast, looking at the same time period of the building permits that were pulled, if you break that down in generalities, between 2010 to 2015, there were 3,300 building permits issued. So we're actually seeing a net immigration of population coming into Jackson County, and the population is increasing at a faster rate than housing is being produced. What that means in our market is it means that it's a supply and demand issue. Rents are going up. They're going up faster than the median family income is going up in this county, and that's creating affordability issues. I passed out a handout. This is all information that's provided by the state of Oregon, most of it's census data. And what it basically boils down to is not only is housing becoming more and more unaffordable for those that are earning at that 80% AMI or 50% AMI, but there's not enough housing as well. If you look at that center column of 50% MFI, you can boil it down to, it looks at how many renter households are out there that qualify for that type of housing versus the number of housing units. There's a deficit of nearly 8,500 units in Jackson County right now for that population. This is just another way of looking at it, that there's three different income levels demonstrated there. The green is 30% AMI or less, the yellow is 50, and the orange is 80% AMI or less. Looking at the middle row there of 25, what that's representing is for every 100 renter households that are earning 50% area median income, there's 25 units available for those 100 renters. We also see a demand for affordable housing in our own programs. That Housing Choice Voucher program that I talked about, that's kind of the golden ticket. That's where you can receive that voucher and go anywhere in the community, pay 30% or less. Presently, that wait list is about 4 years, 4,000 to 5,000 households on our wait list at any given time. What we're seeing is that the success rate is also declining. So people are waiting 4 to 5 years to get that Housing Choice Voucher. They come up, they get that voucher. We give them the voucher, they go out in the community, try to find a place to rent. It used to be that the success rate for a voucher recipient was about 85% actually finding that housing unit. Over the last 5 years, that's declined from 85% to 65% as it continues to be on the decline. That simply is because there's not enough housing to keep up with it. Even though they have that voucher that allows for the affordability, there's not enough units for them to go out and actually utilize it. That becomes worse when you're talking about certain subpopulations or special needs populations or justice clients. Landlords can essentially, they have a whole bunch of people wanting to rent the same unit. So when they when they have that many options, it becomes that much more of a barrier for somebody like a criminal justice client to actually convince a landlord that they should be rented to, even with that voucher. We also see the demand for affordable rental housing displayed on our wait list of the housing units that we own and afford, or own and manage. The wait lists for those are anywhere between 6 months to 3 years, just depending on the site. In the city that it's located in Ashland, we have a project. That one's the most sought after. That's a 30-year wait list for a 50-plex. So that's the bad news. The good news is the Housing Authority continues to work to try to serve the clients that we serve. We have multiple projects, as I said, in our current pipeline. Newbridge Place, that actually will be opening in a week. That'll have 64 units. That one's a pretty special project for us. It's a first of its kind, partnering with Oregon DHS and the Maslow Project to bring housing to homeless youth and families with youth, with wraparound services that go with the housing. So the Maslow Project will actually provide the services. DHS writes a check to Maslow to help fund those services, and we're providing the housing. Creekside Apartments, we hope that this will be completed in spring next year. This is another similar project. This one's located in Central Point. It'll have a housing affordability component, a housing component for homeless youth, as well as a housing component for homeless veterans. And this one's in the planning stages. We hope that we'll be applying for this project and the funding here in the next few months. Freedom Square 2 is located in White City. It'll be 50 units. We hope that 18 units of those would be set aside for homeless veterans in partnership again with the VA. The other thing that we're trying to do as a housing authority is not just provide housing, but provide wraparound services for vulnerable populations that may have more barriers of getting and keeping housing. Because what we do, our expertise is housing, it's not the service piece. So we do a lot of partnerships with other agencies throughout the community. Some of those include the VA Rogue Retreat with Chronically Homeless, DHS and Maslow for homeless youth, or families with children. And we also work with Pathways and Living Opportunities for people living with disabilities. Some of the other recent developments, partnerships with Community Works and the Jackson County Continuum of Care for housing for domestic violence survivors, as well as those 35 vouchers that we recently received. We have a list of partners that are helping us actually get those vouchers out into the community so that they can be utilized on a quicker pace. And I think that's it. Thank you for your time.
So I struggled in my home with my mother for a long time. I've been off and on homeless since I think I was like 8 when I first ever really roamed the streets. I was out there at Hawthorne Park when Hawthorne Park was like the big juggalo scene, you know what I mean? My heart goes out to everybody out there. Like, it was just kind of freedom, you know, being out there. And it's a struggle. Like, I've lived on the bike trail just about all my life. I know everybody out there. Friends are dying like nobody's business. I just try to, I don't know, it's been a long time, you know. I try to reach out to everybody. Living in a tent and not having, you know, anywhere else to be is really hard. It's a struggle. Not knowing when your next meal is or if you're going to be warm that night, you know. Me and my fiance did it for the last like 5 years, losing my kids, you know. It's hard out there. I got a little over 6 months clean right now. I decided when I got pregnant with my last kid, I ended up at the work center, and I realized I was pregnant, and I went straight to my PO, and I was like, I can't do this. Like, I just started using heavily again, and I was like, I'm not going to lose another kid. You know, I can't do this anymore. It was getting old. I wanted to be in a house with my family, you know, get my other kids back. I want to get married to my fiance, who I love dearly. Like, if he didn't come into my life, I don't know where I would be at right now. So when I decided to go in the ARC, it was kind of a struggle, you know. I kind of had to get a nudge to actually do it, but once I did, it saved my life. The outreach that's out there right now, like, it's very limited. Compassion's Highway, I work closely with. They're amazing people, and If it wasn't for them, I don't think we would have really anything. There's a lot more services out right now than there was before. But like I said, if Compassionate Highway, Melissa Main and Carrie Foster, if they weren't there for us, I don't know if we would ever get help. It's, there's hope right now, but, the community just kind of looks down on us. So, for being homeless and for a while there, it felt like we were just abandoned, you know what I mean? But like I said, Compassionate Highway is an amazing program, and if it wasn't for them, I don't know where I would be right now.
So how's it going? My name is Luis. I'm marketing and brand strategist at Access.
I'm Tara Griffin. I'm a community support specialist in the OHCS department.
Cool. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about our specific programs with housing at Access. Kind of just a rundown. Last year we helped over 52,000 people here in Jackson County, which is 1 in 4 people. And we distributed over 4.9 million pounds of food through our food pantry network here in Jackson County as well. So we provide housing, we provide food, and we provide weatherization and rental assistance programs as well. So the first program that we're going to talk about today, kind of Jason spoke a little bit about it as well, is the Access Reentry program. This program helps eliminate barriers for people who have been incarcerated or may have crimes on their record. So helps eliminate barriers to housing through Access, and actually helps them go through our rental assistance program as well. And it helps us actually also give other programs as needed. And Tara can talk a little bit about.
Yes, so the Reentry program, and actually I'm over at the Community Justice Center 3 times a week, and I'm actually there to screen homeless, people that are coming out of jail. Basically, that's one of the components of the Reentry program, is they have to have a, sorry, I'm not good with crowds. I was asked to do this at the last minute. So for individuals that are coming out of jail and they do have a background and it is a barrier for housing, that is a special program that I'm overseeing and helping them come across get across those barriers to find housing and keep them housed. So from this program, they would actually then see if they would qualify for our rental assistance programs or deposit assistance, and possibly even case management. So it's kind of just to see where they're at that point once I talk to them at Reentry. We also have our veterans that do come over a couple times a week for those citizens. So that's pretty much on the Reentry program.
Yeah, and it is a pilot program, so it is kind of the essential part that we're kind of gathering the information and data that we need so we can share it with our partners and we can figure out what the best practices are to kind of eliminate those barriers into housing, because it is a barrier that kind of affects a lot of people as well. So the next slide. The next program that we do have is the Bridges program. This is a clean and sober program for independent housing. So Access provides about 1 year of counseling to these families and kind of puts them in the transition to be able to actually get housing. And it's very impactful to see families in their graduation being impacted by this program, that they're able to transition from addiction to full-time and long-term housing. We can go to the next slide if you like. So we'll talk a little bit about coordinated entry.
Coordinated entry is actually a continuum of care, and it's a database that helps with the screenings that we do on the homeless population. And the questions are based to see what the needs of this individual is, so that one of the 18 agencies can reach out to them, including Access. I work with this every day in my case management, and with Access, we calling back people off of the list. Of course, the need is obviously more than what the resources are, but coordinated entry is also a way to find out exactly what that person would need, and then the resource to reach out to them, to make it pretty simple.
Yeah, as you can see here, so it's important to identify that a lot of the services that Access does provide in terms of housing, they're not immediate and they're not emergency services. And coordinated entry allows us to designate and kind of just start organizing some of that data. So it is dependent on timing and level of vulnerability. The state does prioritize families, seniors, and people with disabilities, and there are over 1,000 people on the non-veteran list and over 500 on the homeless at-risk list as well. So once we can provide these services, we do provide quite a bit of other services. We have rental assistance, deposit assistance, housing assistance for veterans, home purchase education and counseling, weatherization, and energy assistance. So kind of talking a little bit affordable housing and rental assistance resources. Rental assistance, this allows us to prevent that barrier of having to put down a deposit on a home and providing some assistance on the rental side of things as well. And in home ownership and related services, certified HUD counseling service, and it just kind of helps educate our clients to be able to get into housing. We have ready to rent programs as well that we do as well. And
As far as the additional access programs, what do we have listed here? So the home ownership programs, there are classes that they can come in and take, and there's down payment assistance that's available. We also wanted to touch back on the rental and deposit assistance programs that we offer. As far as once they get screened and get called back in, we do help families and individuals anywhere between 3 months and a year. That's with rental assistance and energy assistance, all different various components in order for someone or a family to be self-sustained. And so coming off of assistance, say TANF or food assistance, it's very helpful for them to receive these services.
perfect. And I think next slide is good. So yeah, that's pretty. We kind of ran through it pretty quick. But good contact information for housing. We do have Gina, who is our support services director, and Tara. So if you guys do want to get in touch with any of our housing programs, these are great people to talk to for that.
Thank you.
I don't know if maybe you can answer this or Jason. First of all, I have to admit I'm never going to try to grow a beard again after seeing Jason's beard. Secondly, Jackson County and many other jurisdictions agreed to participate in the Continuum of Care, which was supposed to help identify people that were homeless and really take an inventory. And part of the promise of doing that was to potentially bring more dollars through the federal Section 8 HUD program as one example, and also maybe for you. I'm wondering if the 35 vouchers you mentioned are a result of us gaining ground and in
Absolutely.
having an inventory. Okay,
It is. I mean, we lost for many years. I think that we lost ground in that territory, and the COC has been restructured. We're now gaining ground in multiple facets, and that's just one example of getting those 35 vouchers. And we actually have an application in now for additional resources in the same avenue. We could not be asking for those funds without a partnership with the COC.
Yeah, it's another one of those things that I hope this group goes out and talks about, because people believe we're all just sitting back, not working together, trying to bring resources into our county. And this is evidence that we are and that it's working, so I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, and definitely Connie Wilkerson, the Jackson County COC, she's a critical part of that happening, and having all the different work groups and partnering with the 18 other agencies to make sure that list is accurate, make sure that list is up to date. They're calling constantly to make sure that the people that are on that list can still be made in contact with. So it is pretty crucial to keep that list accurate and make sure that the other agencies that are partnering with also use it as well.
And to actually have a list.
Yeah,
that was one of our problems.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we still have Stacy Brubaker here. Well, I want to respect people's time, Stacy. I was hoping you could come up and share what you have prepared around mental health housing supports. So thank you, Stacy.
Okay, Stacy Brubaker. I'm the division manager for Jackson County Mental Health. And I got to see what I wrote because it's been a minute since I put this together. So Jackson County is actually one of the highest counties in the state for the number of adult foster beds that we have for people who have serious and persistent mental illness. So we have 91 folks in a variety of different foster homes, and that number, the desire to get people into foster homes continues to grow as we cut down on access to state hospital beds. So we are actively recruiting to see if we can grow some additional foster beds for this population so that they can remain in the community. They're all privately owned and operated and licensed by OHA. We are simply the navigator between those two. We go to the homes, we make sure that they're safe, and we report that back to OHA. We also offer services and supports to folks that are in that home and those homes, and then if they are being served by other service providers in the community, such as Options or Columbia Care, then they also send case managers into those environments to try to stabilize and support folks in those environments. So that's quite a few people that live in adult foster homes here in the county. We also have 2 transitional living homes. We rent them from Access. They're over on Ross Lane. We have 12 people, so 6 people in each home. This is often our bottleneck. We put people over there thinking it's going to be transitional, and then they wait and they wait and they wait for their vouchers. And so it doesn't end up being as transitional as we would like it to be. We have a staff skills trainer who goes over there 2 or 3 times a week to run groups, and then is also available to help them stabilize and be able to maintain there. And we also respond to crisis when something happens over there that they need support for. The Kelly House, we actually took this over from Community Justice to really be able to afford some opportunities for folks who are co-occurring, have mental health issues, they're involved with our forensics program, and they are in the early stages of recovery. As ARC has grown throughout the last few years, we are now down to only having 2 beds for those folks, but Doug Houston, my forensics manager, is the gatekeeper for that. And again, we see some pretty good access to that and being able to do additional wraparound supports and hopefully keep those people from going back into jail or returning to their addiction. So there's a word missing in these. JCMH, we actually provide about 20 individuals a month, not in a year, but a month, rent and deposit supports. We put people in short motel stays rather than having them be homeless. We wrap around supports around them, and we provide and help with basic living expenses if somebody didn't have a bed or needed groceries or any of those kind of things. And then we have another additional 25 individuals a month that we support as they're being diverted from higher levels of care or stepping out of a higher level of care. We actually get some dollars from the state in our intergovernmental agency agreement to really support those folks, and it's supposed to be transitional and one time, but what that's really become is a rental assistance program for people who are either being diverted from the state hospital or stepping out of the state hospital because there's not enough capacity in housing to be able to move them around or step them down into lower levels of care. So it's still not supposed to be used for strictly rental assistance, but that's really what it's become in this community because of the housing crunch. Other supports that we offer are through the human service grants. So we give some dollars to the Access program for rental assistance with senior disability outreach, trying to fill in the gaps of some of those rental assistance programs for the older population and individuals with disabilities. We give dollars to the Center for Nonprofit Legal Services to really be able to help in landlord-tenant relationships and really trying to make it so elderly folks can stay in their home and be able to get the supports they need to be able to remain in the community. And then we also give money through to the Hope House through Salvation Army, again providing transitional housing to homeless families and individuals. So there are multiple different ways that we support some of the housing efforts in the community. And again, for our population, we really struggle with that the next step from transition because of the lack of housing opportunities for that population. That was fast.
That was pretty quick, but
Yep.
I think it's a really important piece.
Any questions? Kelly?
Did you mention the forensics manager? And I think Eric had said something about that. What is that?
So Doug Houston is over our forensics program, and our forensics program actually includes a lot of things. So those are the staff that we have embedded at probation and parole and at the transition center. We also oversee aid and assist for the people who are not able to aid and assist in their own defense. So we have a case manager that works with them. We oversee the PSRB, the Psychiatric Service Review Board, or guilty by means of insanity. There's about 16 folks in our community that we supervise in that program. So it's really, he oversees anybody that is involved with the community justice system or with the jail population. And then he also oversees our assertive community treatment team and mental health court. So he's busy.
So I guess she's asking what forensics means. Does it mean they're justice engaged?
Justice involved. Is that a longer answer than you wanted? It's justice involved.
Just trying to simplify
Short
it
and
here.
sweet.
Just trying to simplify.
Okay, good.
All right, Stacy, thank you so much. To all our presenters today, thank you guys very much for coming and to share that. So, again, thank you all for being here. Look for this on the website, and we'll see you at the next lip sync.